Okay, so we start. Sorry for the delay, and welcome to the first set of special sessions. In case you're not sure, you're on the session Agriculture, Biofuels and Watersheds, Nexus Governance Challenges at Local and Global Scales. And I'm going to have a very easy job in introducing the speakers today because they're all from the Center for Development Research based here in Bonn. And just a few words on how we chose this topic. You remember Imme Scholz's talk today in the morning, and she was basically discussing the factors that inhibit governments from collaborating, or government departments or ministries to collaborate across ministries to solve complex nexus problems. And I think that one of the factors she did talk about is that governments often have to deal with moving targets. The whole system is changing frequently and fast. And one of the key drivers right now, at least in our discussions, is energy demand, and particularly bioenergy demand, which is very much linked to land resources, land use. And so we chose to focus on the energy topic. And we'll start with one talk on the global trends in bioenergy demand, and how this might link to issues such as food security and environmental problems. And we're going to look into 3 different case studies from 3 continental areas. So we have one case study that looks into food and biofuel issues in Indonesia. We're going to have one case study looking into biofuel and food nexus issues in Western Africa. And we're going to have one session looking into water and food production issues in South America and Brazil. And I hope we're going to have some time in the end to discuss how these things might fit together and how the local case studies then fit to the global picture. So basically we'll have 4 presentations, each 10 to 15 minutes. I will allow very short questions of understanding after each presentation. And in the end we're going to have a longer discussion. And I now invite Alisher Mirzabaev to present his ideas on the global bioenergy issue.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my topic today is I will try to give a more global overview of the trends and also of the literature related to bioenergy, food security and poverty reduction, also how this bioenergy question relates to the Nexus discussion. First of all, bioenergy is derived from woody biomass, agro-residues, energy crops, and agro-industrial, municipal, and other wastes. So another term which is related to this discussion is bioeconomy, which is the aggregate of all industrial and economic sectors and their associated services which produce, process, in any way use these biological resources. So, and biomass here comprises of all biological resources used or processed into energy, food, feed, and other bio-based, for example, bio-based chemical products. If you look at the reliance on traditional biomass for energy, mostly wood, you can see that about 2.5 billion people in the world still rely on traditional energy as the main source of their energy use. This reliance, in terms of numbers, especially high in developing Asian countries, India, China. But if you look at the share of traditional bioenergy as a share of the total energy use, the highest numbers are mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, people rely up to more than 90% of their energy needs are covered from traditional energy. And so you can have similar numbers for many other countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So in this context, a lack of access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy is one of the key barriers to sustainable development, especially in developing countries where there are a lot of communities which are in so-called energy islands. They are cut off from centralized grids. They are isolated in terms of their energy channels, so that they can rely only on the local resources. So there are many other global and local national drivers which promote or constrain energy development. For example, one of the global drivers for the development of modern bioenergy is its potential to help in mitigating climate change. So the research problem in this context, how we can how we can frame our reliance on bioenergy, on modern bioenergy, without undermining environmental sustainability, but also trying to achieve the multiple Nexus outcomes which would be positive for food security, for environmental sustainability, for poverty reduction, and also improved health. So there are three research areas which we are now currently looking at ZEF in this perspective. First is we are looking at the economic, social, health-related, and environmental impacts, trade-offs, and synergy of bioenergy development within all this, within Nexus framework, but with a focus on household and community levels. Second is how we can develop, what are the constraints and opportunities for decentralized energy, and also how we can catalyze multiple win outcomes in terms of economic development, energy security, and food security, especially for the poor, using bioenergy as an entry point in the Nexus. So here I don't need to explain about Nexus because the audience is well aware of this concept. What here I would like to highlight is the trade-offs between energy and other Nexus components. We have water and food security, which are kind of very well studied in the Nexus, at least relative to energy. But energy is the sector which seems to me has received much less attention in terms of its relations to other Nexus components. So bioenergy has trade-offs and synergies, for example, with food production, which is very well known, well-publicized competition for land, for water. Also, there is a relationship, for example, bioenergy, deforestation, soil erosion. Many household communities, to get their energy needs, they can cut trees, can gather fuel wood, and this deforestation may lead to soil erosion. And soil erosion may lead to increased the silting of the dams downstream and result in lower energy production. So at the beginning, the households' drive for was to collect more firewood to get their energy, but at the end we are ending up with less energy production, maybe at more larger scale. And also other linkages like water supply, micro hydropower, modern bioenergy adoptions. Some studies found that in those locations where you have access to electricity, there's also higher likelihood of adopting other bioenergy technologies. The conceptual framework that we are using in the current research at ZEF on bioenergy is inspired by the Nexus framework, a little bit modified, where we put households and communities at the center of our this Nexus interactions of energy, water, and land. And from the left hand, we have drivers, several different drivers categorized into economic, social, institutional, technological, environmental, and other policy-related, which interact within the Nexus and then result in certain outcomes in terms of food security, poverty reduction, labor market effects, gender equity, and health effects. And then we can have next round time effects once. So this is a continuous process. And we can influence this process by the governance, iterations, incentives, and other options, policies, and actions. So coming to the trade-offs and more discussion about the relationship of energy with the other components of the Nexus. So there is a very big debate about the role of energy, modern bioenergy, such as biofuels, and their relations to food security. Some studies say that from 3 to 75% of recent global food spikes in 2008-07 was caused by biofuel development. And some studies show that there may be biofuel production can lead to increase of malnourished children. Rosegrant and co-authors calculated up to 10 million children, preschool-age children, could be malnourished as a result of biofuel development. On the other hand, biofuel development could be also good in terms of increasing incomes, especially for those farmers who are net sellers of crops. But for those who are net buyers and for urban poor, it may have negative implications. So what's the way forward? There's a suggestion to develop biofuels only on marginal lands. There are a lot of hopes attached to the third and fourth generation of biofuels, which seem to have lower trade-offs with food security. Bioenergy also has very direct linkages to poverty reduction. For example, in Tanzania, a study found that massive biofuel development could lead to reduce poverty by 6% over 12 years. So there may be several mechanisms through which this works. First, through generating new rural jobs and employment and business opportunities, and also, ironically, by raising food prices, because for net food producers, net sellers, the smallholder farmers who are net food producers, higher energy crop prices, higher food crop prices can have positive impacts, and also this may also increase land rental values, which is already happening. In many countries, land values have already increased by 4 or 5 times, and also by bringing more investments into agriculture. But this is context specific. In some other settings, the studies found no effect at all on poverty, for example, in Brazil. Bioenergy is also one of the reasons why there was a big drive into modern forms of bioenergy, biofuels, was that their potential to mitigate climate change. However, if you look at the life cycle assessments and take into account indirect land use change, the carbon balances are not always net positive. And there is also concerns about biofuel expansions and their potential negative influences on biodiversity. So again, the same kind of solutions are coming up. Maybe we should plant biofuels in marginal lands, should develop faster this next generation of biofuels. But one of the aspects of bioenergy which has a lot of big social impacts which are not as much highlighted is the effect on gender and health. About up to 4 million people die because of use of traditional bioenergy in a traditional way, because of health-related smoke, indoor air pollution, and smoke related to use of traditional wood for cooking, for heating. And this especially concerns women, who are in most developing societies are responsible for cooking, for these household activities. And also, it was found in Malawi that fuelwood collection has disproportionately more negative impacts on the education of the girls, who are supposed to also allocate their time for fuelwood collection. So modern bioenergy development has this development potential in terms of reducing the disease burden of women, reducing healthcare costs, and also improving the productivity of female labor, and also providing children, especially girls, with better education, opportunities for school attendance and performance. So in this sense, what are the research areas which we think at ZEF need our priority attention for bioenergy in the Nexus? First is the quantitative evaluation of Nexus trade-offs and synergies. So I have talks about some of them. So they need to be not just reviewed in terms of literature or evaluated subjectively, but we need some kind of quantitative model-based evaluations of those linkages. And also the feasibility, spillover effects of decentralized energy at community levels. What can be done there? And also, very importantly, health, gender, and labor productive effects of modern bioenergy options need to be better studied. I think with this I finish my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much for keeping better than expected in time. So I can allow for 1 or 2 questions of clarification if there are. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a fundamental issue as far as analyzing these particular trade-offs and synergies, and that is the unit of analysis. Because often when you talk about water, it's the watershed or the river basin, but then when you talk about energy and food, it's often the political unit. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, in our case, the unit of analysis is household. And we also would like to say something about community level, but the basic unit of analysis is household, because we would like to have idea of how this bioenergy development is influencing the poverty status, food security status at the household level. So many of these questions, especially when you look at the gender, it's even less. It should be disaggregated. It should be gender specific. It should be within household. So even household level, we need to go more deeper into gender segregated effects of all these things. So, but in our case, what we are looking is at household level.
One here and one there, and then we start with the next.
Yes, and I don't know how much you've looked at the economics of these issues from the household level, so maybe my question is not relevant, but I think one factor that's often missing from all these discussions about affordability of energy, food, or whatever, is the rate of return that investors expect on their investments. Now, of course, some investors in developing countries are, just single families, but some of them are corporations, particularly when you're talking about modern biofuels. So if people expect, a 10% return on equity, fuel is not going to be affordable. If they want a 2% government subsidized loan, right, to finance the investment, you're looking at a different situation. So I generally find this issue of return on investment totally missing from these discussions. Have you looked at that issue?
Well, we have a PhD student who is working exactly on this kind of comparison in India. In the case of India, what he is finding based on, he's starting his research, what he's finding based on his review and knowledge of situation, there are lots of this kind of business investment projects in India on bioenergy, on decentralized energy, and most of them are failures. Because of many reasons. Because, for example, people do not want to have some long-term certainty about the returns of their investments. If after 1 year there will be centralized grid coming to that area, then what's the potential for continuing having some returns out of the investments? Moreover, fluid competition, for example, competition with other traditional energy sources is very tough. Because fuel is free. So even if you try to bring down the cost for other energy types, households, especially those in dire poverty situations, may still opt for fuel. But what's needed, I think, also in that case to raise awareness about the cost of this traditional energy, which is not immediately understood, for example, through healthcare costs or through lowered opportunities from female labor or from reduced school attendance and other costs of children. So direct economic calculations should be, I think, enriched by this kind of side effects or other effects which is not usually taken into account.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate your comprehensive and interesting presentation. And I, in particular, also liked one of your first slides there where you point out that currently in many developing low-income countries, biomass is in fact the source of energy. So perhaps when we look at the interlinkages with agriculture, we also need to understand that the baseline very often is that there are very many links between the energy and the agricultural systems which are negative. In other words, we take out a lot of biomass, which causes a lot of low productivity within the agricultural sector. So from that point of view, shifting towards more modern biomass sources, we might actually achieve large productivity gains in terms of how much water and land we put into the biomass generation. So from that point of view, that type of shift in relation to food and how that impacts on the agricultural sector, I think might be actually rather positive. But to my mind, we don't have any quantitative information really on how much that impact is today, and I guess that's what you're raising as one of your outstanding research issues as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think it was more comment, but I agree with you. Thank you very much. For example, let's take simple things like animal manure. Do we apply it as a fertilizer to a field to get higher, or do we burn it as an energy source? Or let's say, hey, do we apply it as a mulch or feed it to animals or sell it? So there are lots of trade-offs which are known, but where we lack some quantitative data about the magnitudes and the impacts.
Okay. Please keep your question in mind. We have to keep in the schedule. We're going to have time at the end to discuss more. Is that okay?
One short question.
Okay, while I put on the next presentation.
No, because to him
No.
personally.
Yeah. Please ask while I'm working here.
Go ahead.
What is the practical implementation can be done by your presentation and bioenergy production for Central Asia?
Yes.
Particularly, not for all world. What you looking, because we have the scarcity of water. How it can be used in our region?
Okay. In this project, we are not working on Central Asia.
I understand.
Yes, but in Central Asia, I'm also from Central Asia. We have a lot of potential. For example, in developing microtechnologies, for example, like solar energy, or better use of these agricultural residues for biogas and other development. So we have not yet studied the question in that region, in Central Asia yet, but probably this is something we can. There is increasing needs for energy, and we need to get this energy from somewhere. And so this kind of renewable energy sources probably have also great potential in Central Asia.